This is Jewish Spotlight, a weekly television program presented by Chabad Lubavitch of Long Island, featuring various aspects of modern Jewish life and Jewish culture. Now, here is your host, Rabbi Tuvia Teldin.
Shalom. In the Jewish Spotlight, we'd like to show you a little bit of a view of Judaism that sometimes you might not be exposed to. And there's so many different areas of Judaism to discuss. I'm sure we're never going to run out of topics because there are a lot of things that we could delve into. But one of the most important things about Judaism that most people don't understand the real purpose for and how it fits into the whole picture of Judaism is the belief in a Messiah. Now, some people who are not familiar with that being part of Jewish belief might say, Messiah? I thought that was a Christian belief. But the fact is, this is a belief that was taught by our prophets who received direct prophecy from God that there is going to be a time and an age when the Messiah, a physical human being, will come and will bring a new stage of development to the world itself. In order to discuss this a little bit further, I invited a scholar, one of our rabbis from the Stony Brook University campus, to join us in order to be able to really explore what is this belief, how does it relate to you, and what does it mean to you personally, not just as a belief, but as a personal part of your life that relates to you and that really makes a difference. And you'll see that this can add an extra dimension to your life that perhaps you never thought would be possible. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Rabbi Adam Stein. He's a Chabad rabbi at the SUNY Stony Brook campus out here in Long Island. Rabbi Stein, pleasure to have you with us.
Pleasure to be here.
Can you tell us a little bit of the background? For those of us who are not familiar with really what is the Jewish belief in Messiah, where does that belief come from? What exactly is the basis upon which Jews for thousands of years have believed that there will be a day and an age where we will see the Messiah come?
Well, actually, we have it in a number of places in the written Torah. That'd be the 5 books of Moses that was given to Moses and the Jewish people at Mount Sinai. And then, of course, in the later prophecies of Isaiah, Zechariah, Ezekiel also talks about the building of a third temple in Jerusalem that we have yet to have seen. But primarily in the Torah itself, we have prophecies that talk about how the Jewish people will be dispersed from across all the nations of the world. The one time we all lived in Israel, will be dispersed and kicked out, of course, for the sins of the people. And God promises He'll gather us back to the land of Israel. And that gathering back to the land of Israel is more explained in the prophecies that will be done by a rabbinic personality, a person whose stature is higher and much far above any normal person, who will spiritually endow everyone to open their eyes to see the world of truth. And then he will instigate a messianic era and bring all the Jewish people back to the land of Israel and rebuild the temple and live a world spiritual bliss.
But this person will only come at a time deemed by God proper for that transition to take place. It's not as if the person himself can push the button and all of a sudden make this happen. This is something that God Himself will say, this is the right time and this is the person for this transition to take place with.
Exactly. Actually, Mashiach in Hebrew literally means anointed. That's Mashiach, meaning the word Messiah in Hebrew. Anointed, meaning the Mashiach has to be an anointed person. King David was an anointed king from a prophet. And the children of his seed, someone from his seed will be anointed, in this case by God Himself, to be the Messiah, to be Mashiach.
Now, Maimonides, who was one of the most famous codifiers of Jewish law, and according to all opinions, had one of the greatest understandings of Jewish tradition, wrote down what we call the 13 principles of faith. The 12th principle of faith says that Ani ma'amin b'emunah shlema, that I believe in a complete faith that Mashiach will come, and even though He may tarry, nevertheless I believe fully in His coming from day to day. So there's an essential part of Judaism. Now, this is one of the 13 principles of faith. He could have chosen the 10 Commandments and 3 others. He could have chosen any of 13 principles in order to be able to say that this is something that's important. Why did He make that belief in Messiah one of the basic 13 principles of faith? Is it that important within Judaism?
Well, it's very interesting to note that Maimonides, when he codified the entire Torah and summed it up into these 13 principles, he was doing this about the year 1000 of the Common Era. Now, the prayer book was established 1,000 years beforehand. And of course, all the prophecies were 2,000 years beforehand. If you just look in the prayer book, there's constantly every other word that we say in our liturgy are praying for a day and age of peace and tranquility. And constant prayers, we have a specific prayer called the Shmoneh Esrei prayer. It's a standing silent prayer of 19 blessings. And in there, literally 7 or 8 of the 19 blessings are praying for a new age that's going to be established, will be a reestablished kingdom of David, talking about the Messiah. In our after blessing, when we eat bread and we make an after blessing, thanking God, it's called grace, Birkat Hamazon. There we're praising God and asking God to send the Messiah, the Mashiach, to rebuild the temple. It's constantly in everything we do. The fact that it's only one of the 13 should be what should be amaze us. Not the fact that is it so important that we have that it's in there. The fact that it's only one. In fact, it's even more than one. The 13th principle talks about the resurrection, a following era of Messiah. It's actually 2 of the 13
Which is
principles.
another concept that most people think is not really Jewish, but it really comes from Judaism.
Right, the prophet Ezekiel himself. It comes out that generally every Western religion, the principles come from Judaism. They've adapted it for their own religions, but they're all found in Judaism.
Now, let me ask you a question. And I'm going to play a little bit of devil's advocate here. Let's say a person looks at this and says, okay, you guys are a bunch of dreamers. Judaism is just doing this in order to be able to give people hope for the future. The Jewish people have been persecuted throughout the ages. You've had a very tough time through history. So you have to have this hope for the future in order to be able to keep on going. Considering the amount of persecution you've received, then this gives you a sense of direction and gives you a sense of hope for the future. But to really believe in it is really, it's not for me. Some people might say it's not something that I can take seriously. What do you say to somebody who says that to you?
First thing I'd like to just acknowledge the person's correct. It gives me a tremendous encouragement. He's absolutely right.
Okay.
A tremendous hope from the future. And it's a positive thing. And that is actually what belief is. Belief is something that you can't prove. Belief is a blind faith thing, that you believe that this is going to be true. However, if we just analyze that the Torah was given on Mount Sinai, it was witnessed by millions of people and passed on unbroken chain, a written chain, an oral chain, continuously, that they have no reason why not to believe it. And the fact that it gives you someone so much encouragement, it should ring true. And if you just look at the world at large, the internet, there's things that you see signs of possible coming together. The European Union, the whole fact that the whole world is on a kind of new world order and people are trying to come together and make peace.
I want to get to some of these quote-unquote proofs of the fact that Mashiach is soon, but I want to go back a little bit, if I could step back into this, the original question I asked. Another perspective I'd like to lend to it is that basically, as the Rebbe explained, sometimes we look at the idea of Mashiach from an exile mentality. In other words, we're not really looking at it from a godly perspective. And the fact is, as the Rebbe explained, that, and let's say a person has a question. This world is so imperfect. God is perfect. How could he possibly create such an imperfect world? It must mean that either God forbid, is imperfect, or is it just messed up? And he just didn't know what he was doing, and he made a world that was all filled with mistakes. So the question really comes out as this. Of course, Judaism teaches that God is perfect, and God deliberately made an imperfect world. And he could have made it perfect. It would have been very easy for God to make it perfect. But he made it deliberately imperfect. Why? So that we could have the schut, the merit of being God's partner in the process of trying to perfect it. So that when we talk about the world and the imperfections of the world, and we get so used to the negativity and the murder and the pain and the suffering and all of the evil that's in the world, Judaism's message is don't look at that as being reality, the ultimate reality. The ultimate reality is God. The ultimate reality is that there is pure goodness. But what? God created it with all the imperfections so that we should have to struggle a little bit to see through it, to see that there's really a godly core behind everything that exists. And this is what happens when Mashiach comes, that godly core comes to the surface. It comes more into the presence of our day-to-day life. And in that sense, I think it answers also, at least for many people I talk to as well, why we can look at the world either as being imperfect with a period at the end of sentence, or imperfect as a part of a process of perfection. And this is Tikkun Olam. Tikkun Olam is a very famous term common to all denominations within Judaism of fixing the world, that our purpose for Jew and non-Jew alike is to make the world a better place, to try to perfect it. So this is something that I think also is very important. Now, getting back to the various proofs, which are very interesting. I know you mentioned a couple of them. Can you tell us a little bit more? Things that are literally a fulfillment of the prophets of thousands of years ago that have happened before our very eyes, that are clear signs that there's something going on in our day and age which we should open up our eyes to and realize that we live in a historic era.
I think one of the most foremost examples that we see that we're on the edge of the Messianic era is the fact that the ingathering exiles is actually happening in a very real sense. For 2,000 years, the Jewish people lived outside the land of Israel, and now, in just the last 60 years, the Jews en masse are going back to Israel.
It's incredible.
Absolutely amazing. It boggles the mind. This is literally an example of the ingathering exiles. Now, of course, it's not the real ingathering of the exiles. That is actually going to happen when Mashiach himself comes. However, we're seeing a illumination of this,
Sure.
a paving the way of this happening already.
And the open miracles that took place in order for that ingathering of the exiles in the last 60 years to take place, whether it be the fall of the communist governments, the fall of the Berlin Wall, the fall of so many different governments in order to allow the Jews to come out. It's something that nobody would have imagined 60 years ago.
And also, if you noticed, the whole idea that was made in the 1960s, an anti-war movement, at the time is in the context of the Vietnam War. However, the anti-war movement, the fact that people don't want war anymore, they don't want despots, the fact that we saw now, just in the past war in Iraq, that people are against despots. People don't want despots ruling anymore. There's also signs of Mashiach. There's a spirit of goodness in the world, that people are really coming together for freedom and to be kind to one another. Ultimately, this is going to be realized when Mashiach himself comes, but we're seeing a illumination of this in the world, an inkling of this in the world.
Right. And just, let's say, the internet, for instance, the fact that the world is becoming such a small place where something that goes on this side of the world affects the other side of the world, and it's just incredible how the oneness of all the world, even from a scientific perspective, how many of the scientists are coming to understand the oneness of all the creation, how everything is coming from one source. It's just one thing after another is reinforcing this idea that everything is coming from a God.
Right. And a lot of the ways we see the Mashiach's coming is dependent really upon the insights of the Jewish leaders of the generation. And Lubavitcher Rebbe has pointed out numerous times of some of the things we're talking about now, but most important was the 1991 Gulf War. That the 1991 Gulf War, the Rebbe told us, explained that this was part of a messianic prophecy that is to lead to the upcoming messianic era.
What exactly did the Rebbe say? Can you tell our audience?
Well, it's a very interesting thing. There's a midrash. It's an ancient rabbinic text, approximately 2,500 years old, in which a certain rabbi, Rabbi Yitzchak, if I'm not mistaken, was talking about a future war. There'd be a future war between the king of Iraq and a king of Arabia, and that the whole world would become very nervous about this war, and suddenly the king of Arabia would try to seek help from a Western nation. And at this point, the Midrash, this prophecy, starts talking about how the Jews would be tremendously afraid of the outcome of this war. Tremendously afraid and feel tremendous threat, to which then this Midrash quotes God as saying, you have nothing to worry about. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe explained that this war, at the time, 1991, between Iraq and Kuwait and threatening Saudi Arabia on the Arabian Peninsula is the prophecy it's talking about. And the fact that Saddam Hussein was going to shoot all the Scud missiles at Israel was the fact that all the Jews would be afraid. And the fact that God said he had nothing to worry about was expressed with the fact that 39 Scud missiles hit Israel and not one death occurred from a direct result of the Scud attack.
And the Rebbe said in the way of a prophecy that there would be no harm done to any Jew in Israel as a result of those attacks, which at the time people didn't understand how the Rebbe sitting in New York could make such a statement, but it was on the basis of this medrash that you're quoting.
Entire blocks of apartment buildings were totally collapsed by a Scud missile, and miraculously, you'd have an apartment building of 300 people, not one person was killed. Tremendous miracles. And actually, there's a book that went in and analyzed where each person was and how come they weren't killed and how the beam fell this way and fell that way and protected them. Tremendous miracles. And this is the prophecy of Mashiach, because the Midrash, this ancient rabbinic text, ends saying this is the year that Mashiach will come, meaning this is the time frame. And that is when the Rebbe started to point out all the signs of Mashiach.
It's interesting also, in the Psalms of David, King David, it says that 1,000 years to man is like one day to God, which means that we believe that the times of Mashiach will be at the latest the year 6000, which is the beginning of the Sabbath, the seventh day, the day of rest. As a result, the year 5750 would be really the beginning of Friday afternoon, the eve of the Sabbath. And if we make the correlation, the year 1990, 1 year before the Gulf War, was that year, the year of 5750, where we begin the preparation for the last preparations, the last quarter of the day in preparation for the Sabbath. And according to Jewish law, you could even begin to light the Sabbath candles in the last quarter of Friday afternoon if you want to accept the Sabbath a little bit early. And it was just a year after that that we had to go for, and we had this clear statement by the Rebbe concerning the fact that we have gone through a transition which is of monumental importance in world history. And the Rebbe clearly said also, all we have to do is open up our eyes. You know, sometimes we read the papers. We open up the papers, oh, that's today's news, that's tomorrow's news, and the next day. But the Rebbe said, wait a second, don't just read it as today's news. Read this as something that's going on as world history is really unfolding here, and you have the statements of prophets from thousands of years ago that are being fulfilled through the headlines of this paper that's being written today. So it's an incredible thing. One other thing, if I could point out as well, and that is that the Rebbe pointed out, I'm just thinking, I remember a statement by somebody, very interesting statement. He said that if 20 years ago somebody would tell you that you're going to live in a day and age where Jews will not be subjugated to have to live against their Jewish beliefs any place where there's a Jewish community in the world, they would probably tell you that you're crazy, because you had communist Russia, you had countries all over the world, all through Jewish history. There has never been a time since the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem where the Jewish people have not been able, or I should say have been able, all over the world to practice their Judaism as they wish. As of around 1990, with the completion of the freedom of the Jewish people from Russia, and then maybe about 92, when they came out also of Syria, there was a massive exodus. There is not a Jewish community in the world where Jews who have a community are not free to practice as they wish. And according to Maimonides, the difference between the days of exile and the days of Mashiach are Shibur Malchios Bilavad, he says, which means the subjugation of the Jewish people by the non-Jewish rulers of the different nations. That is the difference. When that subjugation ends, where the Jews are free to practice, that, according to Maimonides, is technically already a Messianic era. So as of 1990, 91, 92, we're already living in a time where Jews are free to practice. Our grandparents never imagined there could be such an era, because there never was such an era. And their grandparents, going back to the times of the temple, never experienced such an era. We live in such a time. We live in a time and an age when that takes place. Interestingly enough, though, and maybe I'll give you a little test. You ready?
I hope I pass.
Okay. There's one place in the world where if a Jew practices Judaism, that they would be arrested on the spot. You know where it is? If you would go on, you would put on your tefillin, and you would start to pray the morning services with the siddur and the prayer book and your phylacteries on, you'd be arrested on the spot. That place is the Temple Mount. If a Jew goes and practices there, the Palestinian Authority has the right to arrest you immediately because you're transgressing on their territory. And where's the Temple Mount? That's the one place left that Mashiach has to do his job. What's he have to do there?
To rebuild the temple.
That's right.
In Jerusalem.
Isn't it amazing that that's the last place where it's illegal for a Jew to practice Judaism? And that's the place specifically where the Messiah has to do what he has to do, to rebuild the temple. So tell us a little bit about what our audience can do to help to bring Mashiach closer.
Well, this is actually very interesting, because apparently, so the Mashiach should have came 1991. Where's the Mashiach? And the Lubavitcher Rebbe was a part of a string of a number of great Jewish leaders insisting that the Messianic era is at hand. And the Rebbe at one point gave a tremendous watershed speech, that was like a speech he had not given ever before, in which he said that I have done all I can to bring Mashiach. Meaning there was a principle for thousands of years that every Jew, and every non-Jew for that matter actually, can have a part in bringing Mashiach. That a person should see the world, this is the Rambam, as filled of half merits and half, I would say half sins, half things that are demerits. And one mitzvah, one merit could tip a scale. The merits to the side, and bring Mashiach immediately. So everyone had an obligation to add more merits into their lives, more good deeds, more mitzvahs, more spiritual connections with God should be fulfilled in order to bring Mashiach. And at one point, it should all happen. And the Rebbe said, 1992, if I'm not mistaken, 91, that he has done all he could do. As far as adding all those merits, the Rebbe did everything he can. He now gave over the specific mission to each and every person of the generation, that it's now up to them. Usually people, they draw their inspiration from the leader. The leader inspires people, and they act accordingly. Now the leader is saying, this thing about bringing Mashiach is on your shoulders.
So what did the Rebbe ask each individual to do?
Each person has to now be a good person, as they were before, but they must change their intention. The whole point of Judaism is to do good deeds with a certain intention. Not necessarily for a general moral obligation that if I don't kill my neighbor won't kill me, we'll have a society. This is not a spiritual endeavor of filling the mitzvah of don't kill. Don't kill should be a moral right in and of itself. Whatever's going on around one person. Same thing, a person should act good for a different intention. The intention is that by this good deed, I will bring Mashiach. This good deed I will pray to God that through this good deed, it will bring Mashiach. It will be a conscious thing. Everything you do, this should be the one to bring Mashiach.
So really what Judaism is doing, and what the Rebbe stressed, is to empower each individual human being, Jew and non-Jew alike, with feeling the potential that I have within my ability to have an effect on the whole world. My actions are not just mine, they're actions that have a cosmic effect, that can have a ripple effect that goes literally around the globe. And as a result, I know that if I behave better, if I speak better to people, if I relate to human beings with more compassion, and I do good things, when I want to do something bad, I hold myself back, I know that every single step of the way, I'm not just doing moral for the sake of being moral, which is in and of itself good, not to take away from that, but that it's all part of a bigger plan to be able to perfect this world and bring it to its completion.
And the Rebbe explained further that not only our deeds do make some kind of cosmic reaction and bring Mashiach, the Mashiach so much at hand, as you mentioned yourself, if you'd open up your eyes, you would see this reality, that a person can actually taste the Messianic era here and now through their mitzvahs.
How can they do that?
That this is a different intention, that it's not so much that we have to bring Mashiach, we have to realize inherently that the light and the spirituality of Mashiach is already here. And that itself will click the actual physical embodiment of Mashiach, that God will actually anoint someone to be Mashiach.
So if we, for instance, saying if we behave in a Mashiach manner, if we behave with a type of love and affection and morality that we would expect that we will be living according to at the time of Mashiach, that helps to hasten it, and that's like a taste of the exact era itself.
Exactly.
Interesting. So have you done that?
I'm working on it.
You're working on it?
Do we have time in this program for a short story?
Sure.
So it was a known thing that the holiest place to live is Jerusalem. So back in the days of Russia, you had Menachem Mendel Haradak traveled to Jerusalem, and there he studied all day waiting for Mashiach to come. So there's always rumors that Mashiach was around the corner, and there's supposed to be a great shofar blown on the Mount of Olives that's supposed to be heard the world over, that Mashiach's here. Someone burst into his study, as Menachem Mendel Haradak, a great Hasidic rabbi, was studying, and said, the Mashiach's here. Menachem Mendel Haradak stood up, was a little confused, opened the window, looked this way, looked that way, shut the window, and said, no, you're mistaken, Mashiach's not here. Now the Rebbe asks a funny question. Wouldn't you feel within your heart, right now, Mashiach's here or not, why do you have to get up and look out the window? You would feel a spiritual euphoria. The answer is, Menachem Mendel Haradak already had the Messianic euphoria. He just wouldn't know unless everybody else didn't. So that's why he had to look out the window. He was already living Mashiach already.
Interesting. So, just for one last thing also, when the Rambam Maimonides talks about tzipui, that we have to wait for Mashiach, a lot of people think of waiting as being a very inactive, kind of passive type of activity. What's it mean that you have to wait for Mashiach?
It's more of a kind of a wait expectancy, meaning that my waiting can be stopped through my actions. It's not like a line. I'm dependent on the teller in the bank for my line to continue, and I'm just dependent on somebody else. It's a waiting that you're dependent upon yourself. Should you want to bring Mashiach, you don't have to wait anymore. You're not waiting for something else. You're waiting for yourself.
Right. Okay. Explain a little bit. I'm not sure I follow you.
Meaning that the waiting, usually waiting, is dependent on somebody else.
Yes.
I'm
waiting for
bank,
whoever it is. Right.
Yeah, or I'm in the bank. I'm waiting for the teller to take the next person. I'm then up. This waiting is dependent on you. It's a waiting that you're waiting for Mashiach, but it depends on you to end the wait through your actions to actually bring Mashiach.
So it's an active waiting. It's a waiting that requires taking responsibility and doing something to speed the line up.
Exactly. Change your life. You can maybe if we use this analogy, you would appoint tellers in the bank, or volunteer yourself to be a teller to hurry the line to move up. But yeah, it's a waiting that it's so an expectant waiting that you have the power to actually stop the waiting itself.
Right. Now the Rebbe spoke also about the importance of individuals learning more about the belief in Mashiach, because knowledge increases the belief, and once a person starts to see it in context, it doesn't sound like such a far out thing, and it becomes, like you said, something very, very comfortable, a person can live with and feel very at home with. And that's really the ultimate goal, is to feel at home with Mashiach, and it shouldn't be such a foreign thing. Do you have any suggestions how a person can learn more about Mashiach?
Well, I believe at the end of the show there will be a website advertised that people can go to the website and learn more about it. But generally, people can just open up the book of Isaiah. You read, I believe it's the 4th chapter that talks about that there'll be a day and age in which the lamb will lie with the wolf in peace. They won't have to fear for its life.
Right.
A person can read these sentences and think about these sentences, close their eyes and imagine these sentences. But the best access for information is, of course, a Judaic bookstore, kehotonline.com.
That's KEHOT online.com.
Order books, plenty of English books about Mashiach. And again, they would learn a little bit, think about it, meditate about it, get excited about it, until eventually they incorporate these inspirations into their actions.
Okay, if we could just put up that website also. That's www.moshiach, M-O-S-H-I-A-C-H, that's the Hebrew transliteration, and that's .com. And it's a very nice site. I've looked at it before. It has a lot of information about Mashiach. We have on our website also, chabadofcomac.com, a whole section about Mashiach as well, which people are welcome to look up. And it's really quite an education, and it's an aspect of Judaism that most people are really not familiar with. Rabbi Stein, we just have less than a minute. Do you have a last message you can give our viewers?
The last message would be that a person must change their lives. That everything we must do, no matter how good we are, we must be better. And if we see faults with ourselves, we must change them. Same thing with Mashiach. We must somehow bring all our inspirations in our life to want to do mitzvahs to bring Mashiach, and teach our neighbors this way, and reach out to everyone like this. I think America had a feeling like this after 9/11, that with our kindness we can fight evil, and this must be a person's whole life goal.
Well, thank you very much. And listen, I don't think that could hurt anybody. If anybody works towards that, it sounds like a good goal to me. So in the meantime, give some thought to all this. I know it sounds somewhat strange. It's new perhaps to many of you, but believe me, it's coming right from the guts. And Rabbi Stein spoke very kindly about and nicely about the whole idea of Mashiach. Shalom. Take care of yourself.